Welcome into the show today. Thank you for making this podcast a part of your day. We've got very early breaking news on this Tuesday morning. The Minnesota Vikings have unofficially signed defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, who previously played for the Washington Commanders. Now, here's a little bit about Allen. He's 30 years old. He made the Pro Bowl in 2021 and 2022 when he combined for 16 and a half sacks. He's recorded 42 sacks and 108 starts in his 8 seasons from Washington. He played college ball at the University of Alabama. And here's one of the keys about Jonathan Allen that really sticks out to me. Last year, he had an injury to his pec, missed several games mid-season and at the end of the season, came back late when they realized it wasn't a full tear. But prior to last season, when he missed several games, Allen has been very durable throughout his NFL career, missing only a combined 3 games in his previous 6 years, which is important for a 30-year-old defensive tackle. He comes to the Minnesota Vikings with a clean bill of health for the most part during his 8-year career, which I think is a very valuable thing for a player that's 30 years old and will be playing on the Minnesota Vikings organization for 3 years until he's 33 years old. So that's one of the first things that jumps out to me. Another observation about Jonathan Allen that jumps out to me, and it's really not even about Jonathan Allen, but it's about the Minnesota Vikings roster reconstruction. The Vikings are addressing important needs during this free agency, just like they did last year. And they're being very selective with who they're bringing in. So they brought in a center. They are bringing in a defensive tackle. They re-signed Byron Murphy Jr. They signed Rodgers, a former Eagles cornerback. The Minnesota Vikings aren't taking their money and splashing on the biggest free agency names. They're taking their money and selectively picking guys that have performed well in the past, like a Jonathan Allen. And they've also selected guys that are coming in and can be contributors right away. They might have a past, like the cornerback that they signed yesterday from the Eagles has a little bit of a past. His contract number wasn't high. He had a little gambling issue prior with another organization, but he clearly has potential and clearly has ability. But there's no doubt that signing Jonathan Allen is a huge need for the Vikings, because instead of sending 6 or 7 guys at one time to get to the quarterback, which the Vikings have done for the last 2 years, the Vikings need to change their strategy and get after the quarterback with just 4 or 5 guys. Instead of setting the house and setting the Engage 8 blitz going back to Madden like 2008 on my PlayStation 2, the Vikings can rush 4 and get to the quarterback, because that's where we've seen the Vikings defense struggle the most when they face high-end competition. When they face the Ben Johnsons and the Matthew Staffords and the Sean McVays of the world, we have seen the Vikings defense struggle a little bit more. When they face that high-end offensive coordinator competition, those guys are smarter than, typical mid-level offensive coordinators. So when the Vikings face those competitors, we've seen the Vikings defense struggle more. So in order to combat that and compete with those big-time offensive gurus, the Minnesota Vikings needed to address this position and get a player like Jonathan Allen to disrupt the quarterback and the offensive line. So this is a very good signing, and he will complement Jonathan Grenard and Van Ginkel very well. Harrison Phillips, I think, is still on the roster too. So this signing was a big deal because the Vikings just got another disruptor that can impact the game. And when you think about defensive tackles, it's not always about their stats, how many tackles they get, how many sacks they get. Because you look at his sacks number, it doesn't really blow you away. He had 3 last year in a shortened year where he was hurt. In 2023, he had 5 sacks. In 2022, he had 7.5 sacks. 2021, career year of 9 sacks, which is very good for a defensive tackle. But when you bring in a defensive tackle, it's not really about the sack numbers. It's not really even about the tackle numbers. It's about how disruptive they can be to the offensive line. And it's really about blowing up the offensive line. Maybe that first guy misses. Maybe the running back gets that first defensive tackle to miss. And then other guys can come in and take care of business. This guy is a major disruptor, and he's a big-time talent that the Vikings just signed. And he is going to help the Vikings defense immensely, which the Vikings desperately needed. And you see the Vikings being very intentional with their signings, and you see the Vikings addressing areas of needs all over their roster. Also for the Vikings, this signing does not mean that they have to give up any picks, because Jonathan Allen, he was released by the Commanders earlier this offseason, which means that he does not count against them in the compensatory formula with high comp picks on the line. So the Vikings get Jonathan Allen without having to give up anything in return to the Washington Commanders, which is a very exciting thing. 3-year, $60 million contract. And Brian Flores gets another shiny toy defensively that he can use. And the Vikings lost Cam Bynum. Harrison Smith, we'll see what happens to him in these next few weeks. If he's going to retire or sign with another team, or the Vikings cut him, or if the Vikings keep him for another year. But the Vikings secondary is going to look different because of the guys that they signed. Byron Murphy Jr. stays. But the Rodgers, new cornerback, Theo Jackson will presumably be the starting safety in replacement of Cam Bynum. And now Jonathan Taylor. I want to call him, why am I calling Jonathan Taylor for? Jonathan Allen. 3 years, $60 million contract. You think about that front 7, front 8, Blake Cashman, Ivan Pace Jr., Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, Jonathan Allen. That's a very solid front 6, 7, 8 that can disrupt the other team without necessarily having to apply more pressure than needed from the secondary. So this move is going to enhance the Vikings' ability to force other teams to struggle offensively without needing to send the house. And that's my biggest observation from the Vikings signing Jonathan Allen. So it's a very exciting day. I'm sure there'll be plenty more moves because things still need to be decided between Daniel Jones. Who are the Vikings going to sign as backup quarterback, because Nick Mullen signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there's certain things that need to be decided in these during this period of NFL free agency, and the Minnesota Vikings, they need to make some moves, and they need to make some decisions, whether that's Daniel Jones or Aaron Rodgers. It'll be interesting. Here, one more stat on Jonathan Allen. According to Next Gen Stats, The Vikings did not have an interior defensive lineman record 20 or more pressures in 2024. So this was a major area of need for the Vikings, and they addressed it. So it's a big deal. And Jonathan Allen is in Minnesota for these next few years. Great signing by Kwesi, and the Minnesota Vikings organization got stronger this morning. Thank you for watching this quick reaction podcast, and thank you for making this podcast a part of your day.